I've been considering for a while a series of master classes that will be an attempt to bring together a number of ideas that are fundamental to being able to establish and maintain a natural environment in your aquarium. So what I'm looking at is a master class in natural systems. This is broken down into a number of areas, the first of which is simply to describe what is a natural system. The second, to look at substrate as the fundamental component in our aquariums of a natural system. And the third is the diversity, the biodiversity of that system. And that leads into the kinds of fish and plants and other organisms that are living in the aquarium. But it starts with the idea of a natural system. And what is that? I tried earlier today to shoot this video sitting on Curry Creek, but it's a windy day and the wind was wreaking havoc with the microphone. It was in and out to the point where it was so distracting I gave up listening to it. And I know if I did, you would too. So I'm sitting here in front of a couple of my fish tanks trying to find one that looks nice enough to put on video. These are all pretty young systems, at least in this location. I brought them in, about 11 tanks, from my store, which I have shut down, and set them up in a little circle, a horseshoe of tanks with my studio in the middle. And have not spent any time or effort yet in the last couple of weeks doing very much with them other than putting water in them and putting out a few fires. I bought a few plants, put some plants in them. Beyond that, I've done nothing. And I've done it with the notion that these, because they are tanks that already have established substrates, they have the potential to develop naturally. I want to be able to do that gradually and slowly and build them into whatever it is they're going to become. So, natural. What do we think of as a natural system? Well, if we look out in nature and study nature, we see a lot of components that are frankly not easily duplicatable, and if we try to duplicate them, they tend to fall apart at the seams. We can provide light, but not sunlight. We can provide air, but not wind. We can do water changes, but not rain or tidal flow. There are things we can do in a vain attempt, if you will, to replicate nature, but they're frankly poor substitutes. So what then remains for us to be able to claim to have a natural environment? I think it really has to do with allowing the aquarium to do what it does best, to allow water to do what it does. Water and life balance themselves in any given environment. If you pour water into a tank and throw a bunch of gunk in it, it's going to reek and foul for a while, but eventually it will settle out and it will stabilize, and it will become, in many ways, a living environment. It may even develop various forms of algae. Various protozoan may take up life in it. It will become an environment in which life is going on. So I think at its most basic level, that's what we mean by a natural environment. An aquatic environment in which life is able to not simply sustain itself, but to thrive, to grow and mature, to become something more than it is now, to become more than it would otherwise be if there were nothing living, to become an intergenerational kind of experience, for there to be birth and life and death in it, for there to be growth in it, for it to be something that that thrives in some very meaningful way. I think that is more than anything else what we want to have when we set up an aquarium, when we strive to create a natural environment. So the very notion of a natural environment is really basic to what we're all about in creating a tank to begin with. We want it to be natural. We want it to be something that will thrive in some real way. Something in which at least the fish and whatever plants we put in it will be able to live healthfully, happily, successfully. That's a natural environment. So how do we go about that? How do we go about creating an environment that allows living organisms to grow and thrive, to multiply, to die, to hatch, to be born again? How do we create that kind of environment? Well, as I said, there are a few basic elements. And probably the most basic element is really not the water. It really is the substrate. Because the substrate is what gives the water its texture, its life force. It's what controls the parameters of the water. It's what creates the environment for all of the processes, the breakdown of waste, to be able to convert into something that is usable by residents in the aquarium. So the substrate is critical. And what about the substrate is critical? Well, its components certainly are. And more importantly, its biodiversity. The variety of life that occurs and expands and develops in that substrate, and likewise in the aquarium, in the water column, are what creates and sustains that natural living environment. So we're going to be looking at those elements as well. The biodiversity, the substrate, all of which comport to a natural environment, one in which life can be sustained. So here we go. How do we create that natural environment? Well, the first thing to understand is that you are part of it. You are part of that natural environment. So consider yourself not apart from it, but to be a part of it. And you're a rather integral part of that natural environment. What you do and how you act determines the direction in which it's going to go. So don't consider yourself somehow apart from the natural process, but see yourself as a part of that natural process. As a part of what's going on, as directing or encouraging certain things, as creating opportunity for certain kinds of growth to occur, certain kinds of processes to occur. What you do has everything to do with what happens in that aquarium. You don't simply dump a bunch of things in a box full of water and walk away. Now, you could do that, and to some extent that's what I've done here, but only to the point of letting it settle down and sort itself out so that I can begin, not managing it so much as sculpturing it, trying to build it into something that is a reflection of my sense of aesthetic proportion, perhaps. Something that will be healthy for the living organisms that are in it. That's all part of being a natural environment. It's something that's alive. Every aspect of it is alive. Every dot and tittle, every drop of water, every grain of sand is alive or has life in it, on it, around it, supporting it. Every bit of it. So the more life you can bring into that environment, the more successful that environment's going to be. And that's the issue of biodiversity. The diversity of life is what sustains life, is what creates balance, is what keeps one thing from becoming dominant, is what creates balance among all the variants, among all the different living organisms. Even down at the level of bacteria, if there are not many different kinds of bacteria seeking balancing each other out, then one or another will take over and run rampant and frankly destroy the environment. It's what happens when you dump too much food in a tank, for example, and it becomes polluted. That's nothing more than one bacteria taking over and running the whole system. Something to be avoided. And how does it get avoided? Well, simply by adding more diverse kinds of bacteria. So we'll show how we can do that as well. But for now, let's simply think in terms of how we want to create a natural environment and what creating that actually accomplishes, and really what it is. What is a natural environment? Why, it's whatever you create, whatever you put together, because the life force that is in all of those elements, bring it together in a way that creates not just conflict but harmony. And ultimately, out of the conflict comes harmony. You put various and diverse things in together, some of which don't like each other very much, but they settle down and they achieve a stability and they become harmonious. That's in the natural way of things. That's in the way of nature. That's in the way in which nature works and succeeds and develops and matures. That's the way in which we have been here for millennium and will remain here for millennia more. It is what nature does. She sustains herself, and even in that little tiny tank you're creating, over time you will see that the tank seeks to sustain itself. It seeks to achieve a balance, a harmony, a healthiness, a wholesomeness, a cleanness, a way in which all of its components are healthy and successful. That's in the nature of a natural system. Look for that to happen. That's not something you control. That's something that happens in spite of everything else you do, because it is the way of things. It is the way in which water in a glass box, with whatever it is you install, will achieve a greater and greater harmony the longer it is allowed to sustain. So that's what we're about. We're about the business of creating harmony, of creating a natural system. Every little thing we do leads to that and reinforces that and builds upon it. So let's get started in Chapter 2, a masterclass in building a deep substrate. Thanks for plugging in and watching and being a part of this channel and this series of videos. Be sure to catch us in the morning on our live streams. We're here every day answering questions, encouraging, and helping ourselves and each other to achieve this natural environment that we all struggle for. Bye for now. See you again very soon.